Hi everybody, here we are, end of week 2, and we are kind of building momentum now as we kind of all adapt to this course and the setting and everything else. We're still having people joining and so forth. I want to thank Henriette for moderating this week, and because it's always hard to be first in one of these kinds of courses, and she was on her own, although I was helping, but she she had the lion's share of the work to do. And she's also created a nice summary in the main view for the week here, which I actually took the liberty of both. It's both an attachment and also open in the note too, so you can read about that there. I find these helpful to have these summaries of the discussion for the week, just to you can always go back in a later week, and if there was something that you remembered and you weren't quite sure, it helps you sort of find things. And speaking of finding things, somebody asked me about where search was. Under Windows here, here's a search for notes, and you can do this by person, or you can search by conference, or you can do it in any conference, or you can search by actual words, and it will do a search for you. So if you wanted to find, call, let's say, and you search, it would come up with all the notes here that have got the word call in them. So I just want you to know that that's there, and you can also get to messages and add resources and so forth. You can also look at this. This is our course, and it shows you all of the where people are and who's talking to who and that kind of thing. And this will change all the time as we spend more time in the course, and it's an interesting way to see how things are going. Also, thank you to those of you who responded back to this, to the reactions to working in smaller groups. I like to try to discuss these kinds of things very explicitly in class, because first of all, because it makes, I think, the expectations clearer, but also I see these courses that I do in online environments as very much having this meta layer of reflection on what it means to teach in these environments. So when you're learning in them, I think it allows you to get a different perspective on, well, what would that be like if I was going to use this with my students? What would I need to do, and that kind of thing. So I like to have us reflect on these things as teachers and as learners. That's one of the values of doing this experience, of doing these courses. So it's like a sort of iterative experience. I will be tweaking. So I do use groups normally, but I want you to be kind of conscious that that's a very conscious decision on my part, and might be for you too if you're doing this kind of work. I particularly think in language learning it's important to have smaller groups, because people need time and space to sort of think and call up language. It's different, and so it's very difficult to do that, I think, in a big group. So the goal of this week was to look historically, really, at how call developed and its evolution. And I think it's important when discussing anything, but perhaps particularly educational technology, to situate the research in a more broad context. Because technology use in our culture is very much embedded in social practices, as I guess most things are. And it's also very politically volatile, both positively. Think about what the sort of this idea that online education is so available, so you can be working and you can always get access to education and that kind of thing. But negatively too, with something like cyberbullying. But it's a very big part of our culture, and there's a lot of money tied up with that. And as soon as anything has such financial implications, there are other pressures going on, at any given moment that influence how ideas are taken up. So we have to be quite conscious, I think, when we look at this kind of work. Additionally, most educational technology use was embedded in earlier psychological theories of learning, like behaviorism in particular, and later on, and currently, more constructivism, which itself is a more interdisciplinary theory of learning. But because it's an area of education that has these close IT links. It's interesting because the theorizing behind the use of technology, that kind of behaviorist view that was so embedded in computer-assisted learning when that sort of came out, which became, was taken up very much in second language learning and also language labs, right? So there was always a natural kind of affinity for those kinds of experiences. But that kind of approach faces new challenges, especially when a very individualized approach, with more current understandings about how embedded social practices are in our technology use. And so we have to look at our social structures and not just assume that this is all really about cognition only. It's a very holistic kind of experience, and learning a language is, and so is literacy practices. Literacy practices are about understanding what's valued in our culture, and developing a language is a very multisensory kind of and multifaceted kind of learning experience. There's also always a lag between published research and the edge of new technologies because of the time involved in research, right? It just takes a long time to get research out and published. So, and I think it's important then to think about the affordances of technology generally, and think about what, if different ones represent, different kinds of groups of technology. So, Gunda's talked about how different core technologies supported different kinds of skills, like listening and speaking and writing and reading, and each of which, of course, is a vital part of language learning, and the development of literacy. But those are differently supported by different kinds of tools. And so that is really where we start all the time, is what kinds of experiences do we need to provide, and then what technologies can support us in doing that. And I also find it's a way to be less overwhelmed by the myriad new things that come out all the time, because sometimes we get comfortable using a particular technology because it does certain things for us pedagogically that we're happy with, and I'm not sure that it's always necessary to be always using the most new thing. It doesn't mean that because it's new it doesn't mean it's better, right? It just means it's new. Sometimes it's better, sometimes it might be easier too, and that's good. But I think that as teachers we have to think about our use of technology as something that evolves with time and experiences, and should be rooted in our own kind of practices. So chopping and changing and rushing from technology to technology, I don't think is a good way to teach. I mean, I think we have to evolve those practices, and I think you do a better job of teaching with something you're comfortable with, and that you understand why you've integrated it into your teaching, than you would with a technology that is new but very trendy. One issue that came up this week was not equating information and information access with knowledge, and I think that's a really important thing, because part of the rhetoric of technology in our culture is that more is better, and information access is really is the thing that the internet gave us, and so now the world is our oyster. Well, there's a big difference between being able to access something and being able to understand it, being able to use it productively, being able to apply it, knowing what it means. And so that's kind of the teacher's role, and it's a challenging one. We haven't really worked out, there aren't curriculum designs that say this is how you do this. We haven't developed a lot of curriculum materials, except individually people are generally sort of developing these things now, but that's not part of what you see, and this is something that's very emergent. So how best to group students, and for what activities? When is it better to have students working individually, and why? I mean, those are different kinds of questions, but they're very important when it comes to any kind of classroom design, but particularly when you integrate technology. It's another issue, so you want to use it when it makes it better. So we're going to see more about this social turn that theories in language learning have, as we continue in our discussions. So we're going to go now into week 3, from literacy to multiliteracies, and Andrew and Fiona are going to be navigating that week for us. And the questions are kind of there and ready to go. And Andrew has they put up a kind of a little activity here. Um, and it's a way of helping you kind of process the idea about the different models of multiliteracies and how you understand that. And I think that's a good thing, because there's a lot of language and a lot of terms in this course, so it's good to kind of spend some time thinking about them, because these are very important ones. And again, this week we're historically grounding these ideas in this work. So this is a really nice, again, this is a history, right, from literacy to multiliteracies, and I think it's important to be aware of that. And this one by Lowen Kinzer, again, it's a 2000, but it gives the rationale, and that's what I want you to understand. I want you to understand the theoretical reasons why these things went in the way they did, and the how we got there. If we don't understand how we get somewhere, it makes it hard to you either go and reinvent things that already exist, or you don't. I don't think you make as good use of the tools that you have. Whereas I think if you understand why things evolved in certain ways and how these processes take place, I think that can situate you in a better kind of position as you continue thinking about these things. So we'll notice the changing role of the teacher. That's going to come up a lot, because it becomes, the teacher then becomes seen in constructivist terms as more of this setting up these powerful environments where students learn through interaction and the active use of multisensory experiences. And that's a very different kind of way of thinking about teaching, the role of teaching. So what does that mean for teacher education? What does it mean for us as teachers acquiring these sorts of skills and going on growing that understanding as we work through our practices? And then, so there's a lot of questions there, and these are sort of themes that are going to come up during the course. Another one was this idea of face-to-face cues online, that the online is always the impoverished kind of experience. But you see, I think that there are other ways to think about that. I've seen that feature of having fewer face-to-face cues as a wonderful positive or a terrible negative. I mean, it depends, and very much on the situation and how the learning expectations take advantage of those limits. Sometimes it's a good thing. It's less information. I can focus on just thinking about my writing, or other times it's actually limiting. But having time to think and compose ideas in writing may be really hugely useful for certain people at certain points in their learning. Especially developing new language skills, or really even thinking about what does it mean to be in an online course. What literacy practices am I using day to day as I engage in this? One of the discussions we had was that, like last week, was this issue of why do we use note titles instead of the word reply? Well, because the social practices in this environment mean that if you the others are able to follow the discussion more fully, and maybe want to come and read your note and that kind of thing. So these are literacy practices, and they're different in an online environment. So we can look at some of those. So I think just always thinking of it as the less use, the more impoverished kind of experience isn't a useful way to think about it. Like everything, it has its moments, and that those kinds of things can be very useful. And again, this is a big theme. We will come back to the kinds of different ways that people can take advantage of that slightly less noisy communication channel. It has its moments. Yes, and it also provides time for sort of observation and thinking about how do you navigate different cultural practices, around how education's performed, such as the level of teacher power and what student voice is like. I try to be fairly egalitarian in this environment. I don't enforce a kind of particular way of looking at the world, and I try to encourage you all to speak up, because I think that's part of what graduate school is. Graduate school is about learning to develop academic voice. But I think all students need to develop their own voice as learners, and you only do that by having control over things. That's another reason why you have a self-assessed assignment in this course. It's part of kind of you exercising agency over your own kind of learning. And it's also okay to critique other people's ideas, you know, but we do it in a way that is supportive and constructive. We don't do it in hostile or sort of rude ways. We talk about you know, how ideas can be improved and made better. So good start to the course, though, overall. Thank you for posting your first assignments, which are here, and I'll be going through these. And what I'm going to do is go through and I'll respond with a private reply to each one of each one of your assignments, and so it'll only be visible to you and me, and you know, not to the rest of the class, you know, for privacy reasons. So I'll do that as soon as I can get to that. We have a search. I'm serving on a search committee this week. We have a bunch of people coming in. We have a new science education position in our department, so we're meeting with and having visits from people who are on the short list for that. So that's going to be interesting. Oh yes, and I did put a new announcement in the announcements about advice and assistance with final papers. So don't forget about that. So as you're pondering these things, and if you want to ask questions, you can ask me. You can also post, you know, your questions in posting, and you can, and this is the sort of idea area. And I've also started a list of journals. Actually, I should make this, well, that you could look at that are relevant to some of the ideas that we're talking about in this course, just to help you find resources if you need to do that. So I think that's it for now. So I hope you have a really nice week, and I will talk to you more as we start thinking about multiliteracies and all the exciting things involved in that. Okay, take care.